Thank you again for joining us at Philippine Startup Week 2020. I'm Kat Chan, the director of Kubo, and I'm really excited to moderate today's session. Prior to COVID-19, e-commerce transactions in the Philippines was pegged to grow by roughly 26% between 2015 to 2019. Now, here we are, clearly an interesting year for internet businesses and especially for e-commerce. In our next session, we'll be exploring the top Philippine e-commerce trends. Our guest speaker on this exciting topic is Dennis Velasco, CEO and founder of Prosperna.com. So, hi, Dennis. How are you?
Hey, Kat. Doing good. Great to see you on this wonderful weekend. And you look quite cozy there in your home office quarters there.
Yeah, so since it's Philippine Startup Week, and of course you're a startup, before we jump in, I do want to hear from you and share with our audience what Prosperna.com is all about.
Yeah, thanks. And first, let me just say thanks as well to you, Kubo, the Department of Trade and Industry, DCIT, and the rest of the Startup Week Philippines team. In terms of me, I actually moved to the Philippines from the San Francisco Bay Area, really to really go for my dream and my goal, which was to bring Silicon Valley level technology here to our country. And that's really where Prosperna was born. And our mission in the last couple of years has been to empower 100,000, hopefully more, SMEs here in our country with simple and affordable e-commerce software. And yeah, I know e-commerce has been something that a lot of people have been talking about for the last couple of years, but now is going to be a great time for our country and other SMEs around that.
This is exactly what Philippine Startup Week is all about, right? Like, so you moved back some time ago and now you're here as a Filipino creating a business in this country, right? And we're showing the world what we can do here in the Philippines too. So really excited to have this discussion with you today.
Yeah, you know what? That's the fun, really proud thing. And I love seeing and meeting more startups, no matter where they're from. But it's really cool, unlike other countries where, smart, talented people leave and they just never come back. And, I was always one of those that felt like, this is where all the opportunity and fun was. So it's great to be here. And it's so awesome to see that we've got this great community. But what's even more fun is some of the success stories that we've been able to share with our customers. When you look at e-commerce and Prosperna, what's been really great is that we've been able to help well-known brands that used to be just in the malls, like Digital Walker, and who during the pandemic, they really had no choice because all the malls were shut down. And we helped them get online, accept payments, and ship their products in the matter of a couple of weeks. Whether it's brands like that or even, really family businesses like Marisons, which is a restaurant in Antipolo, or even multi-location franchises from Taiwan like Share Tea Philippines. Or one of the coolest stories is, when you take really no or low tech organizations like a wet market, this Go Fresh PH customer of ours, they're actually a palenque, the Muntinlupa wet market. And there was a group and association, yeah, of really brave, courageous, merchants there that said, you know what, we got to bring our fresh produce directly to customers. So in your neighborhood, have you
in the
guys
COVID-19 era, basically all commerce is e-commerce, right? Like there's definitely that opportunity for everyone to get online now. And it's almost a necessity even, I'd say. But yeah, Dennis. But I have seen in my work at Kubo a lot of kind of ready to go, put your store online, e-commerce type solutions from all around the world, really, right? So what would you say is the key difference between Prosperna and all of these alternative options that are vying to enter this e-commerce software market?
Great question, and we get that a lot. And I think that's really where you have to dig into the details. And for Prosperna, and how it works, one of the first things that's really great for SMEs is they can really set up their own online store without having any coding experience. Because if you think about it and you look at the landscape of the retail market here in the Philippines, we were really a mall location, very traditional brick and mortar type of operation. And now we're seeing, brands, no matter what size, jump online for their very first time. And so
Mm.
they really can't afford to go out and try to implement a system that's 10, 15 years ahead, because that means it's 10, 15 years more complicated. And so what we're doing is we're investing in the technical know-how by pre-integrating all of the local and global payment gateways so that without any coding or development, literally in one click, they can connect to dozens of payment options, whether it be the COD, the bank transfer, and of course some of the more modern digital wallets or even credit cards.
So really
And then,
leapfrogging a lot of the challenges, right? Like, and in a very localized way too, it seems.
yeah, because at the end of the day, whether it's online or offline, people have to get paid. So that's like hurdle or friction point number one. But if they have to go out and hire a developer, hopefully the developer does it right, and then that's going to take weeks and months to do. Why do you have to go through all that?
And yeah, I mean,
So
if
we're
they're
just
making really good food, for example, you kind of just want them to focus on what they're good at, right? Like, that's my take anyway.
bingo. Simple, straightforward advice, but and it's still tried and true. Focus on what you do best and let the experts take care of the rest. And we do the same thing with the shipping, right? Because merchants not only need to get paid, but they also need to deliver great service by and expand their distribution, right? And with Prosperna and our investment in pre-integrating all the shipping providers nationwide,
Mm.
imagine a brand who used to be stuck at a mall having to pay expensive rent that escalates every year, right? And then if they want to grow, they have to open another location. Well, now they can market, get paid, and distribute their product nationwide in the Philippines by easily accessing in one click over 40 different nationwide shippers. So we're really trying to simplify it. And so when it comes down to the difference, right, this is
Mm.
what I really boil it down to. Based on where the Philippine SME community is, we really need platforms and technology that make it easy for them. So, they can start their store without any coding experience. And what you're starting to see as well is because SMEs had such a difficult, challenging time of economic depression over the last 8 months, there's really starting to get beat down, if you don't mind me saying, about all the transaction fees and other options out there. And, to me, as the guy and the company that wants to empower SMEs, transaction fees, all they do is they just take profits and margin straight out of the pocket of SMEs. And we want to do things different. We want to help SMEs become more profitable. So we built our platform around this premise of no transaction fees and building features specifically for our country. And because business is different here, right? Just ask companies like Uber, right? And
That's
we're
right.
providing more support. I'm happy and really proud to say that we've got a great team, and we have more employees than those organizations abroad that try to come in here. So to us, and based on what the SMEs really tell us, these are the kinds of things that they're looking for, and that's where we come in and making the difference.
That's really great to hear, Dennis. I mean, not just being a job creator, but also an opportunity creator and really leveling the playing field, right, for our SMEs that want to get in on the e-commerce game. So congratulations on everything that you've done on Prosperna, really. But yeah, our topic for today is top trends in e-commerce. So, let's jump right into it. My first question for you really is like, yeah, basically what our topic is, right? So from your point of view, what are the key business trends that you're seeing in the Philippine e-commerce market?
Yeah, let's definitely jump into it. And if you don't mind, Kat, I want to go ahead and put Prosperna front and center as the case in point, because one of the great trends, and we're just a product of what's going on. But of course, we've got to do our job in creating a great platform. And we've been a great example of that trend of amazing growth.
Right.
And hopefully this inspires other startups here in our country and others who no longer have to be afraid to jump into online. Because here, our customers and our partners have really spoken, right? Because our growth has been amazing with their commitment and support of our platform. And we've experienced 18% month over month average revenue growth for our recurring revenue, which is a sign in itself, right?
Mm.
But beyond that, these key business trends, I'd like to take a look at it from a pre-COVID to a current or post-COVID point of view. Because, as a startup founder, I have to convince myself every day that this is the right investment and this is the right direction and that there's a big market opportunity out here. And so when I look at some of the trends pre-COVID, you know, the industry was definitely strong. 26% compounded annual revenue growth rate. I mean, that's certainly a nice number, right? But here during the pandemic, there's been just very recent in the last couple months studies from Google, Temasek, and Bain and Company. And what's really, really cool is that they see a 4+X growth rate in the next 5 years between now and 2025, where the e-commerce transaction growth could be up to $28 billion. So the point being that the future of the Philippines e-commerce is going to be a huge opportunity for SMEs out there, especially for those who can adapt quickly and capture that growth.
And I think we've all seen this also, right? Like e-commerce definitely one of the few things that have really kind of grown exponentially during COVID, right? Like we experience it ourselves in our day-to-day lives. If anything, e-commerce is making things possible, right? But are there specific verticals that you're seeing that are experiencing a lot of growth? Like I could imagine things like essential goods and services, medical supplies, food, but what's the data been telling you on, verticals and trends for e-commerce?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of numbers, and it definitely can vary from the very hyper local behavior. But in terms of broad strokes, um, here's the top 4 categories that we've seen and based on our research. And we get into this research all the time because what we're trying to do is, build some pre-made, templates based on different categories. But these templates can be easily configured and personalized to the specific merchant. And so what we've identified, which is actually kind of surprising, I thought, food and beverage would be the top, but electronics was actually, the number 1 category, and then followed, maybe look at you, you're very fashionable. You still have to look good, feel good at home, no matter what. Right, but
Just from the way stuff, though. I think in most cases. Kidding.
That goes for all of us, right? And then even if you look at Google Trends and some of the research that's out and available, easily accessible, you can even see things or search results that are really high for toys and hobbies. Because let's face it, right? We're stuck at home, and you got to start getting creative and find new ways to
stay sane,
to be entertained.
Yeah.
But then the other top 4 category, absolutely is food and beverage, and this one is probably much more talked about these days because let's face it, Filipinos love to eat, right?
That's true. And I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, the ride hailing sector was so huge, right? Like it created most of the unicorns in Southeast Asia, the big ones, right? So, the food and beverage sector has largely compensated for, or is trying to, right, like catch up in some of the margins that they may be losing in the ride hailing space. So I think that's why it's one of the most talked about, but really interesting how the top categories actually shape up. I mean, yeah, so I mean, this is great, right? But what are your thoughts on like how? Because I think a lot of the big brands we were already associating with the online trend. Obviously, like this
Mm.
saw created a huge opportunity for them, right? But
Hmm.
how would you say like e-commerce and this kind of shift to online, right? How has that affected SMEs, right? And how can they be included in this whole thing? How can SMEs adopt e-commerce technology?
I love the keyword included, and that's really what we're trying to do is equalize the playing field. So what is probably the one of the key things or key takeaways here is that there is an actual pattern. There's an e-commerce maturity pattern that is happening right now and that's actually taking place. Because guess what? Did you know that actually Amazon is 26 years old? Amazon was created 26 years ago.
So a lot, like so the median age in the Philippines is less than that, right? So basically, everyone, like half the country, was born and there was already Amazon. So no, I did not know that actually, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And if you look at, of course, our version of Amazon, Lazada, guess when they were born?
Early 2000s, somewhere there, right?
Uh, Actually, much, much later. You know that Amazon was born roughly only 7 years ago.
Hmm.
And so, what that means is we are still in the very early adoption days of e commerce. Because initially, it is, and I've heard SMEs tell us that the marketplaces were their saving grace. And I love it that there's marketplaces out there. It's an easy, fast way for people to get their brands in front of lots and lots of consumers, right? So, it's important for SMEs to jump out there and explore which marketplaces can help them get into front of their target audience. And you've got the Food Pandas, Lazadas, Shopees, even the Facebook Marketplace and Grab Foods of the world, right? But eventually, these brands and SMEs have started and are currently expressing honestly, frustration. And I've mentioned this already, but they mentioned frustration about high transaction and commission fees, right? Not having that connection and relationship with their customer. And
Mm.
so these marketplaces are really designed to be great for consumers, lots of options at the lowest price, right? But on the other side of the coin, right, these merchants are facing fierce downward price pressure and lots of competition, especially as you get some of these marketplaces. I won't say who they are, but bringing in products directly from other neighboring countries, right? So, what's
Right.
going to happen to the Philippine SMEs? How are they going to compete, right? So, basically, just like an SME would have to try to find other traditional retail channels, they now have to look for other digital channels.
Channels.
So now, right now, and going into the next 5 years, SMEs will be evolving and they're going to be adapting to get their products and services to be discoverable and found on other channels like social media. I think one of our guests in startup, week here in the Philippines is Facebook, right?
Mm.
Um, so I'm sure they'll have a lot to say about that, and so that'll be a continuing trend. But I know we all, probably in your neighborhood and everybody that's watching, we all have a local community Viber group that we're buying and selling from. And we're seeing merchants selling on average of 25 transactions to maybe 75, per month on these Viber groups, right? Because they're trying, again, that's another example, they're trying to find another channel, right? But after that, at the end of the day, people want to control their own brand,
Mm.
control their own experience, and have a platform that connects to Viber, connects to Facebook, connects to Lazada. Because if they're successful, they'll want to try to scale their business, so they're focusing on building their brand, promoting their brand, creating great new products, and um, you know, putting their merchandise collection together, that will deliver what their customers and future customers want. So
Absolutely.
this
I
is
mean,
really cool.
and the big platforms obviously are, very inclusive at Startup Week, and they have a huge role to play also in building out the ecosystem, right? But at the end of the day,
Yep.
like, there is still a desire to not have a dependency on another platform. As a startup, your most important thing, right, like, is that connection that you have to your customers, right? And have being available in multiple channels or having different means, right, to reach those customers and interact with those customers is super important too. I definitely agree.
Yeah, yeah. It's basically you just have to be in as many places that your customers are, bottom line.
So, I mean, I guess since I just spoke about consumers and users or your customers, right? Like, um, maybe let's take a shift to that topic, right? Like, so in the context of e-commerce trends, right? Like, what are key consumer behaviors and trends in that space that you're seeing that SMEs should be watching out for, and startups?
Yeah, I think as a speaking for ourselves and hopefully other SMEs out there, and it might sound trivial, but at the end of the day, it's most important, and the number one thing that people should be focused on is their customer. And so these consumer behavior trends are absolutely the driving force that will continue the growth of e-commerce. So if we look at these, from our point of view, you have to take a look at measurable, quantifiable evidence of what's happening, right? And some of the research that we found, because we don't want to just guess, right? When we build and invest software, you can't just always guess. You have to take a look and see and find and identify trends, and hopefully there's some measurable ones. So when we looked at Google, PwC, and the recent numerous reports from Facebook Southeast Asian research, we're finding numbers like up to 82% of mall traffic has declined. I mean, that is just a deep, deep cut, especially when you look at a previous and historic, uh, more of a mall culture type of country, right?
Sure.
On top of that, companies have all flocked. Look at you and I.
Yep.
You know, in less than 30 days, when I truly thought we were coming back to the office, as I think, Kat, I'm not sure if I mentioned to you, we were actually during that week of March 13th, we were moving up to our big fancy 15th floor office.
You did mention that, yeah. Like, the timing
Yeah.
of that was incredible.
And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, let's all work from home, right? And so the numbers show that somewhere around 73% of the companies, I'm surprised. I thought this number would be higher, right? But have flocked to the work from home protocols, right? And, if you look at how malls and retail centers are set up, the most successful ones are around the BPOs, right? Where all the employees are. Well, if they're not going to work, right, how is the retail going to flourish, right? And then if we can't get to work because the transportation has been very, very limited, now these are huge behavioral and economic undercurrents that are rapidly changing our mentality and consumers' behaviors, right? And some of this research shows, because there's a lot of questions and questionnaires and surveys, and I keep coming back to the good job that Facebook has been doing on some of their surveys. And, it's very interesting, right? That depending on the category, 65 to 80% of Philippine consumers in our country intend to continue shopping online post-COVID. It's a behavioral change that it's just like, when the smartphone came out, right? You're not going to go back to your flip phone, are you?
Like, as the saying goes, like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle or something, right? Like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
a good one. I like that.
this is a question that I get asked very often, and I'd love to get your take on it, right? Like, and you touched on it just now. What makes you so sure or confident, right, that these trends that you've just mentioned are going to last, right? Especially in the Philippine context, like, do you think this behavior is meant to continue?
Sounds like
I'm
there
not
might
asking
be a
for the
little
future,
doubt
but
in there.
I'm curious, like, what your take on it, because I get asked this all the time, actually.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I imagine, in your position at Kubo, I mean, it's not just, is the Philippines ready for e-commerce? There's probably that question, is Philippines ready for technology in many categories, right? And, to be honest, it's as much of a guess as anybody's out there, right? I'm just speaking, straightforward. But when I see the world and what's happening, you can't ignore the fact that, like you mentioned, the average age of the entire demographic of the Philippines is only 24 years old, right? I know that includes both of us, or quote. Right? So we have a very, very young population where the minds and behaviors are still very moldable, right? When you take that plus, right, do you know that congratulations, right, to all of us in the Philippines is the #1 demographic who spends the most time online despite the worst internet. When we want to find something online, we're going to find it, right? We're that
Right.
resilient. And so spending 10 hours a day online with a lot of the young population, these numbers to me make it visible that, again, this is a bit of a prediction, but there's a future generation of consumers that we believe is the click generation. And that's what is forming and happening today. So SMEs, brands, retailers of all types, forget about e-commerce. It's about knowing your customer and being prepared to help them and hoping that your products and services are the ones that they are looking for today and in the future. And if you don't pay attention to these trends, it's either going to be a situation where you lose out or you find new opportunities. I don't know. This is just what I have seen and tried to put together.
That's fair. Yeah. So Dennis, thank you so much for that sharing and for having this chat with me about e-commerce trends in the Philippines. Just some takeaways that I got from the last half hour we've been talking. So e-commerce, obviously, like, huge rapid growth going on right now, but not just the flash in the pan COVID phenomenon, and likely to continue, especially with the demographic makeup and behavior of consumers. I think you mentioned something. We've talked about it being called the click generation, right? Like, the demographics just simply point to this shift, and especially in the Philippines. We also chatted a bit about how the tech landscape will certainly continue to evolve, right? Beyond just the platforms and the marketplaces that we already know a lot about, but to different forms of solutions and ways to reach customers. And yeah, I mean, my takeaway from this really is that this will bring a lot of opportunity and hope, not just for the existing big retailers, right, the tech companies, but also SMEs and startups more broadly, and that there's a huge opportunity here that we're seeing. And yeah, so I really enjoyed this conversation. Just to wrap up, I did want to ask you, like, very quickly, right, like, in a minute or so, tell us about what's next for Prosperna and also how people can reach you, like if they want to get their businesses online with Prosperna.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. And it has been super fun. I always love having our conversations like this. So exciting. So for Prosperna and our future, honestly, it's pretty simple and straightforward because it's been really great to have a clear mission, and that is our mission to empower 100,000 SMEs in our country. And hopefully you can feel it, but it's really inside of us and each and every one of us to help SMEs equalize the playing field with simple and affordable e-commerce. And we're doing that by focusing on local features, putting Philippine SMEs at the top of our priority list, providing them with the local support that they need, and bringing together the entire ecosystem of e-commerce complementary services, agencies, coaches, payment gateways, shipping providers, inventory management systems, POS systems. We've got to put all of those things together so that we can help our community of SMEs and our country. So that's really what we're doing. And, thank you for asking. If you are an SME or thinking about getting in e-commerce or looking to connect with our platform, love to connect with you online. You can reach us at prosperna.com or always find me on LinkedIn. And of course, just shoot me an email, dennis@prosperna.com.
So definitely big things coming up for you and, this growing vertical, not beyond this week and in the next months and years, right? So thank you again, Dennis, for sharing the stage with me here at Philippine Startup Week. Thank you, everyone. That's a wrap for us today. Again, it's been me, Kat Chan from Kubo and from Philippine Startup Week, and catch you in our next session. So stay tuned.